All right. Sam Callahan here, back with another episode of the Callahan Trading Group podcast. I believe this is episode 10 of season 2. I can't believe I'm already 10 episodes in, but winter, trying to stay busy. This is a fun episode because I started planning this one, I don't know, a couple months back, because this is one of those questions I get more than most other questions, and most people on Instagram message me some version of this and ask me all these questions. So I figured I'd condense it and have a podcast to send to them when they ask me these questions. Does gear really matter? Why do I shoot what I shoot? What do I shoot? Etc. Etc. I honestly, I can think of 1,000 clickbaity titles for this podcast, but the fact of the matter is, I just want to talk about, like, does gear make a GM? Does it matter what you shoot, where you shoot it, things like that? So I'll just start with what do I shoot? So I'm a 4-time Grandmaster now with pretty much all the same gear. Obviously, PCC is PCC, so I'm not shooting a Glock in PCC. But production, carry optics, limited optics, and I'm at 92% in open, just shooting my carry optics gear. My limited optics and carry optics gun are exactly the same. I don't have a difference in gun that I shoot. I just shoot the same gun. So what do I shoot? Right now, in its most current form, this is my competition gun. Now, I say that fairly facetiously because this is just a bone stock Glock 45. It's got a Defender ST, the standard on it, 3 MOA dot on it, and I direct mill all of my things. So that's a thing that I like to start with right there. Is one of the things that I am a big fan of is direct mill dots. I like small dots if I can get them. And I'm a smaller, or have been lately, I'm going to get into this, a smaller to medium slide length guy. I like a snappier feel, and I'll talk about why and all those kinds of things. But this has been my competition gun as of the end of the season. This is like the final evolution. And it's funny I say evolution because it's kind of like a de-evolution. It's a bone stock Glock. I just have some of those stick-on handle it grips on it, just some sandpaper grips on it. Otherwise, 100% bone stock. It's occluded right now for training purposes. I don't carry or compete with occlusion, just training with it. I also have my dry fire mag in it for training purposes. But so what I really first like to talk about is this is like the de-evolution after a season, because what I started with in the beginning of the season was the exact same top end for all of 2014 or 2024. It's a Glock 45 top end with the Defender on it. This was the frame I was using. This is a silicone carbide frame, otherwise mostly stock. I'll get into this. It's just a silicone carbide frame. It is aggressive. Like the first couple of months of shooting this, I had to like get my hands used to it, I guess, which is crazy because I normally have like leather mitts. But once I got used to this, it was real easy to hold on to this gun. I used it for, let's see, Delmarva. I used it for Carry Optics Nationals. I used it for all of my teaching up until Limited Optics Nationals, which I'll talk about. And then I ended up switching at Limited Optics Nationals to that last gun I showed you. I really like the silicone carbide stuff. Otherwise, I kept it bone stock. Spring weights and things like that. The one thing you'll notice with this old setup was my Timney trigger. I loved the Timney trigger. I will continue to use the Timney trigger. The Timney trigger isn't why I switched off this gun. That's always, I don't want to say controversial. As a stock Glock guy myself, the only thing I ever found that worked very well to add to my guns was just using a totally internally stock gun and throwing in a Timney trigger. The thing that Timney comes with is these little reset springs in here that reset your trigger, like push the trigger back forward. They have a red one and a silver one. The red one's like plus power. So I always have a red one. And then what I did is I reached out to Timney and I got like, I'm not kidding, like 50 of them. I just ordered 50 of those little springs. And whenever the coating wore off the spring, I just threw another red one in. It takes about 10 seconds. And I kind of found it like, hey, if I'm going to upgrade to a race part, the race parts generally take some fitting, some love, some attention, things like that. For the upgraded quote unquote race part, just taking I'm not kidding, a 30, 45 second switch out of a spring before I went and taught a class, took a class, or shot a match. It was really simple. Other than that, it was a totally stock gun. Now, I loved it through all of these things. I really like the Timney because it allowed me to really like prep a trigger easily. Like it has a nice pronounced wall. It's like it doesn't have any creep to it, like the normal Glock smushiness. It's just got a pronounced wall, pronounced break. Everything's awesome. It's not any faster or anything like that. Everybody thinks that. Like it's not. If you could shoot a trigger, you could shoot a trigger. If we're mashing on triggers, we're mashing on triggers at the same speed. But it allowed me to be a little bit more precise when necessary. The I don't want to say problem because it was my fault. If you are looking on video, I'll describe it on audio as well. Where the safety contacts on this frame would be right underneath this little shoe right here, right? I found that to gain a little bit of speed, a little bit of smoothness, I took a file to that corner and I just rounded the corner off. I didn't really take material off. It was just a 90-degree corner and I just chamfered it, right? I didn't really take much material. I just softened the corner, we'll say that. Well, it was fine. It didn't produce any issues. It didn't produce any reliability issues. It was 100% fine all the way through. I made it through Delmarva, Carry Optics Nationals, and like passing the safety checks and everything. At Limited Optics Nationals, I was at day 2 of Limited Optics Nationals. Day 1 went great. Shot it pretty solid, penalty free. Everything's cool. Day 2, I'm shooting PM, and it was pouring rain. Not great. So like we're all huddled around, and the first thing we're doing in the PM, which is like a noon start, is we're starting at chrono. So I'm like, it's a little chilly. It's raining. It's kind of like the most not fun way to start. Not that I care about chrono. I shoot stock Glocks and outdoor dynamics ammo, so I'm not worried about passing chrono or anything like that. But I go over to chrono and I'm just like, all right, here, quit wasting my time, throw my Glock. And he racked my frame, clicked the trigger, made a funny face, racked it, clicked it again, went on the radio, said Grandmaster to chrono. I was like, what the fuck? Because I shoot stock guns. I've never had this. I asked him what the problem is. He said the Rangemaster will tell me. 2 minutes later, they come over and they described to me that little well, they basically, what they told me is they didn't diagnose anything. What they told me is trigger safety doesn't work anymore. What do you mean trigger safety doesn't work anymore? I didn't notice because you could still prep and break the trigger as usual. I don't like depend on the trigger safety. I know most people don't. This is a competition gun. I didn't carry this in this form, so I didn't really care to check that. My bad. Well, I checked, and that little notch that I had softened through dry fire and through a lot of wear, the safety kind of blasted through my little gunsmith work, and it kept doing it and it kept doing it. And it kept making it worse, and it kept making that notch worse and worse and worse until the safety wasn't contacting the frame at all. And it was my bad. I just didn't check it. I never found it. I could still prep and break the trigger. The trigger functioned very well. It still had a pronounced wall, pronounced break. The trigger was drop safe as far as I could figure out. I won't make any other accusations, but like, I just didn't notice. It was totally my fault. And what ended up happening was it induced this kind of like chaotic day 2 for me. So I went back to my car. I dropped this off, and I picked up that original gun that I showed you. Now, this original gun is my carry gun. That's the funny thing, is that gun has an identical top end to this. It's upstairs somewhere. It's an identical top end, literally a clone top end. The bottom end was the only difference. Now, that's a big thing that I stick to, is like, why do I shoot the gear I shoot? Well, I carry this and I carry Glock, so I wanted to compete with what I carried. I always had that attitude as I started this. I didn't get into this to be like a competition shooter. I got into this to just use USPSA to get better. And I still have that attitude, very much so. Now, I also teach a lot of SWAT and a lot of other guys. And since I carry this and I teach all those guys, I want to stay consistent with my gear. I'll get into that with some gear choices as we talk. But when I went back and I changed out to this gun, I didn't notice any performance dips. That's the big reason why I just started rocking stock again. I went from day 1 of Nationals to day 2 of Nationals. So I can kind of do a compare and contrast. And day 2 of Nationals, it was raining. It was terrible. I didn't have my stipple job. Everything was uncomfortable. My performance didn't dip at all. And I realized, well, I had hit a point in my training where gear doesn't make a GM. And I fully believe that now. I made it to that point, though. My training got to that point. I got to the point where I'm not dependent on that anymore. But I used a lot of advantages in gear and the Timney and the stippling or the silicone carbide. I use all that stuff to get better. Like, it's like using a race car and a racetrack to understand how to go fast, and then I'm better at driving. I don't need the race car anymore to do what I need to do, but it helped to get there. It was a very efficient piece of equipment. Like, this was the most efficient I could make a Glock. So my big things with gear selection come down to reliability first and foremost, which is why I shoot Glocks. I know they're the most reliable thing out there. Now, there's some other choices I'll talk about. Reliability, comfort, and confidence, right? Comfort for me is just when you pick a gun up and put it in front of your face, where does it land? And then confidence is just like, do you understand how, not confidence like I'm the best ever. That's not the confidence I mean. I mean confidence like I know how the gun runs. I'm pretty confident on where the gun, predictability basically. Like, I've trained with the gun enough to be confident with how it reacts. I'm not thinking about it. It's pretty subconscious. So I'm just to a point now where this is the most subconscious, the most comfortable, the most confident gun I have in my game. Now, that said, my evolution is not done. I made it a point to hit a fourth GM with this gun, which is just a bone stock Glock 34. It's just got some Dawson sights on it. That's all it is. It's just the Dawson red fiber optic front, blacked out rear, but it's just a bone stock Glock trigger. Like there's nothing special to it. It's bone stock. It's got the handle it grips on it again, but this is just a bone stock gun. Nothing special. I wanted to see if I could target focus with iron sights and a bone stock Glock and make GM in production, and I did it in like the first four. I think 5 classifiers to be full. I had a one day of struggle bus of adjusting, and then once I adjusted, I hit it pretty quick. But what I figured out is the Glock 34 now. It's a great gun. Everybody likes it. But I was so comfortable in my Glock 19, and I had shot so many rounds through my Glock 19 that I like the shorter, snappier slide just for comfort. That comfort word I was talking about, confidence word I was talking about, it was a lot more familiar to me because I used the 19 through all my defensive training and all my dumb years of being stubborn before I got into this more seriously. And then when I got into this more seriously, I wanted a full-size grip, which was the Glock 45, but I liked the snappy slide. Now, it made me really pay attention. You can't get away with any crap with those guns. I find that you have to be like 99% perfect to run like a Glock 17 size slide and shorter. But if you're 99% perfect, running that gun or running a full-size race gun produces the same results. That was a cool thing that I had figured out. Now, the thing that I also realized is when I fell back to this 34, I started playing with other race guns because I have some other race guns I was messing with. If you're 98, 97% perfect, you get punished pretty hard with the shorter guns, the more stock guns, whereas this 34 was soaking up some of my mistakes. Now, only a certain percentage would be soaked up, but when we're talking about squeezing every 1% out of like a competition, out of a major match, out of trying to hit 94, 5, 6% and trying to hit that GM, then yeah, every little bit of gear will help. But I also found that if I'm 99% perfect, you can give me my Glock 19 and the same things will happen. So it's this like conundrum of discipline over gear really gets you where you want to go, but we're not perfect all the time. So if I was 98% perfect, my gun will allow for some looser standards if I have a 5.4 inch slide and I have, some racier guns in it. But really my big thing was I found a 5.4 inch slide versus just my normal 45 slide. Just this was enough to really feel a big difference, right? That inch and a half was enough to feel a big difference. So this is my final evolution. I'm going to be shooting production with my 34, but my primary division being carry optics. I have a pair of 34s getting ready right now from Impact Machine down in Louisiana. So Impact Machine, Scott's been running my slides for a very long time. I don't trust anybody else to touch my stuff anymore. I've had some I almost slipped and said who, but I've had some bad experiences in the past. So Scott's been doing it since I started. Here's my original slide that I made GM with. It's a Vortex Venom that he slapped on a Glock 45 slide. So I don't trust anybody else but Scott to machine all my stuff on. So my final evolution of training right now, it's just going to be stock Glock 34s because I've learned I don't need more than stock Glocks. The 34 will allow me to push the limits a little bit more. Say if I want to push to 101%, the Glock might soak up a little bit. And I'm just going to have my milled dots that I'm normally comfortable with. I like those milled on dots because I was a machinist of old. That's what I used to do before as a shooter. And I don't trust plates much. Now, the only plates I do have, I mentioned Scott from Impact Machine. He's the only person I trust for a couple of my guns have plates on them. But when I can, all of my guns are direct milled to all my slides. It's just how I am about things. I think, again, reliability and being able to trust my gear is more important than like fancy race gear. So that said, that's like what I shoot. That's why I shoot it. And that's kind of like the evolution from 2024 to 2025 of the Glocks that I have gone through. That said, I wanted to talk about like the other gear. Like you're not a Glock guy. I don't care. That's totally fine. I shoot Glocks because they fit me. They work for me. I have caveman hands. I'm a weird guy. I've been shooting a Glock since I was 9 years old. So that just like feels right to me. But if you were to pick up a gun and the Glock didn't aim the direction you liked, I tell everybody just go pick up an M&P or go pick up a CZ. One of those three guns with very, very minimal, if any, changes from stock are raceable. They're 100% raceable. The M&P, the 5-inch, the long slide one, or the CZ Shadow 2, or they have a polymer version. But if I'm going to go CZ, I'm going to go with the Shadow 2. You could just jump into any of those guns, and they're all reliable. They all have a slightly different grip angle, and that's what I mean by more comfort than anything is naturally fits you. If you don't love a Glock, it's normally because the grip angle is so annoyingly aggressive, and you have to just drive your grip forward so hard. It gives you tendonitis too. Ask me why. I know. CZ is a little bit less aggressive, M&P as well. M&P is probably the most comfortable of all the grips of all those that I just mentioned. So I just go find those. There's other brands out there. I just don't recommend them for various reasons. I'm not going to sit here and talk shit about anything, but I'm not comfortable recommending some of the other guns to people just for lots of reasons. I'm not going to steer people away from them, but that's my thing. I shoot Glocks, try Glock. You're not going to be able to mask any crap shooting a Glock. You're really going to have to get good. If you really hate a Glock, it doesn't work for you. M&P is another good option for the striker fire. Reliability first, duty ready, but still raceable gun. And if you want a more race ready gun, like we'll call it a gamer gun, but still a super reliable, super affordable gun, that CZ Shadow 2 is pretty much the answer. Now, if you go and look at the stats and what's out there, the Shadow 2 is dominating the competition field by a long shot. Like most of the carry optics guns, especially in the top 20, which is more important. Most of the top 20 winners are shooting the CZ Shadow 2. Not a whole lot of modification. Some of them do, some of them don't. But like you don't need to really modify those guns much. They're pretty interesting. But I find that if you learn to shoot anything shorter and snappier, as I mentioned, the G17 and smaller, you have to be 99% perfect. And then you can then apply that to any gun. Right? If I can shoot a Glock 17 at GM levels, if you hand me a race gun, the only adjustment is dot indexing. It's like, oh, where's the dot? There it is. But once I find the dot, it's on, it's over. It doesn't matter. You could shoot. If you could shoot to 99% perfect, the Glock works for you. And then you can kind of get away with some learning and some messing around with other guns. That's my opinion, but I find most people who have walked that path work. They agree with me. There's another guy out there. I forget his name and I apologize, but he shot a Glock 26 to GM. Insane. Brantley Merriam right now is one of the top 20 GMs shooting a Glock 17, I believe. He's just shooting like a duty gun. He's literally shooting it from like a duty holster too. It's like comical how well he's doing, just not even looking like a gamer. He's just, this is what I do. There's a bunch of other guys out there. Trace Decker is shooting pretty much stock. Like there's a bunch of guys out there that shoot just stock plastic guns that work pretty well. And then there's guys shooting like the Walthers are still pretty stock reliable guns. If I was going to shoot, I actually will start adding that to my list. The Walthers are a very reliable gun that I wouldn't mind recommending to people, but you'll start to see that the guys in like the top 20, 30, 50 they don't depend on gear. They have raw skill. They have a preference in what's comfortable for them. They have something that they like because it's the most comfortable. They have the most reps behind it. They understand it the most, but they don't need the skills to shoot. Like basically what I'm saying is like, they don't learn to shoot that gun. They learn to shoot guns, period. And that gun maximizes their skill set, right? Through a lot of experimentation, a lot of reps, you'll kind of find what's comfortable for you. You're never going to be at your final evolution. There's a funny meme out there of like stock Glock, and then up the bell curve is I need a flat trigger and this and stippling, blah, 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 blah. And then down here on the other side, the guy wearing the Jedi hood is like stock Glock again. Like that's kind of the evolution of things. Now I find it's not wrong by any means to utilize race parts to get better too, because that's what I'm finding in all this. A CZ with a short reach trigger and a 1.5 pound single action brake, like you're going to learn to go fast. You're going to learn to grip the gun well, to make the gun do its thing. You're going to learn a lot by using that race gun, right? And then by going back and shooting whatever other gun you choose to carry, you're going to still have those skills. So by all means, use those race guns to get the skill out there. But you'll start to realize at some point the reliability matters more, and the comfort and confidence matters more than me trying to get like an ounce off a trigger or like an ounce more into my gun. You know, like I don't really care about squeezing like a brass grip plug into my Glock. I mentioned it's just a Glock. The only grip plug I have in this is just a little plastic. He looks like a Grim Reaper just so that I can't shove a magazine in that hole. That's all it is. So I find that a GM is a GM. That's basically what I wanted to make a point about all this. A GM is a GM. Once you become a GM, however your path, once you can say I have Grandmaster skills, the skills are there. Some guys, there's always an exception to the rule. I'm sure there's some guy out there that is just like a one-trick pony with a gun. There's always an exception, but shoot a match, as everybody says, right? Come to majors. Don't just shoot classifiers. And you'll start to see like a GM can pretty much perform at a very, very high level with anything. He's going to squeeze out, though, the best percentages, like those top little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% more skill set with better, more comfortable gear. And I find that at a higher level, that is very important. Like to get to D to B class is not a huge gap, or it's a big number, but it's an easier bridge to cross than the final 5% trying to get from master to grandmaster, right? To get from like 85% to 95% is a pain in the ass. It is. So that's where I think like those little percentages and taking advantage of this, that, and the other thing might matter more than anything. That said, classifier grandmaster performances don't really mimic real true grandmaster performances and like matches and majors and all those kinds of things. So it's a discussion that's really, it depends what avenue you're looking at it from. Are we talking about classifiers? Sure, race gear matters really a lot. Are we talking about match performance? Are we talking about shooting a major match 14 stages to your highest? Yeah, having a sub-second draw, 17 splits, and a sub-second reload isn't going to be the reason you win or lose. I just saw recently, it was Sean Griffith. I read it from him, and he said it wasn't his quote, but a major match isn't a test of your ceiling. It's a test of your floor of your performance. So you don't really need that 101% draw if you're going to then have an 86% stage performance on the next one. It's more about consistency. It's more about being confident. It's more about being able to be comfortable in my gear, knowing what it's going to do. It's going to be predictable. I don't need to try to make it do anything. It's just going to do what it does because I'm a grandmaster and it is my stuff. That's where you'll start to see like attitudes and styles come in. Like I'm a stock Glock guy. It's my style. There's guys out there that shoot CZs. It's their style. Like we're not right. We're not wrong. It's just, why do I drive a truck and somebody drives a car? You know, like there's preference at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. We like Christian Seiler. You can hand him any gun. He's going to be Christian Seiler. You know what I mean? It's crazy. You ever see somebody like Bob Vogel shoot, you realize that Glocks aren't holding him back. You know, there's a lot of examples out there I could sit here and name, but really what I like to say is like, does the gear really matter? Grandmaster's a grandmaster. A grandmaster is going to be able to shoot at a grandmaster level no matter what gear you hand him, as long as it works and he can find the dot or find the sights, right? He's going to be able to. That final 5%, yeah, sure. If you want to talk about classifier performances, yeah, sure, it really matters. But that's like my rundown on guns. Now for gear, a big thing that I'm about is affordability, reliability. I have a lot of students that want to get into this, but they don't want to spend $500, and it's confusing to get into the sport. It is like when you go and try to put a belt together. So what I found is I've been rocking Ghost holsters for a decade now. Literally, this season marks a decade. I bought these Ghost mag pouches a very long time ago. I saw some videos online. I saw some other instructors basically recommending them, and I was like, cool. I want to graduate up from my like Amazon crappy defensive rig now that I'm getting into USPSA stuff. And I got Ghost pouches. I was running whatever crappy Kydex holster for a very long time. And then I was trying to drop that Kydex holster down onto this, and I was trying to put it together like everybody does. They try to buy a drop down from here, and then they buy this clip from here and this thing from here and this thing from here. And I had this Frankenstein rig that worked for me. But the problem was, it wasn't that the holster was bad or anything was bad. It's that it was inconsistent. It was just, it would shift, it would not move, it would break, it would, I was always messing and tinkering with it. So I ended up going to Ghost and looking at what else they had. And I've been running their rigs for a very long time now. This is what I've been running for a couple seasons now. This is the Hydra P, the Hydra P Plus rig. The reason I like this thing, it comes as I'm holding it. So for you just listening and not watching, this is a stiff outer belt that you could hold vertically that's got all my stuff attached to it. It's got a drop down. It's got the holster shell. It's got two magazine holders that it comes with, and it comes with the easy detached clips. I added, as you can on their website, I added another magazine pouch with some magnets on it for gamers' sake, but it comes ready to game. It's the only one I know out there that you can go to a website and go click Hydra P rig, right-handed, this gun, boom, it comes to you, and you don't need to add any parts. You don't need to add this, upgrade this. I had a lot of people who were like, I wanted this cool belt. I'm like, all right, cool, get that belt. But then you have to get attachments for the belt. And then you have to get this interface for this brand to this brand to this brand. And then you're in $400 or $500 for a friggin' belt rig. Whereas this is like a $200-something all-in purchase. It even comes with an inner belt, outer belt, mag pouches, everything that I mentioned, the easy detach everything. It's unbeatable as far as value goes. I can't draw faster in any other holster either. I have set a lot of PRs with this. I have a 59 and a 58 to alpha with this thing at 7 yards. Steve Anderson was sitting there watching. I have a bunch of 76s to the second shot out of this holster, so it's as fast as you could hope for, honestly. What's cool too is I two-gun with it all the time because it's got some retention built into it. It's got a little lever built in right here that's just active retention. If I just push it in and hit this lever, it's on, and then if I just flick it, boom, it's off. This thing is as fast as I could hope for, though, without having to like modify, cut, add, do anything stupid, drop down. It's incredibly versatile as far as this drop down. Like you can change every angle and every. It's basically infinitely mess withable. I'll say that. I'm a tinkerer. I'm always messing with something. But what's cool is once you have it in its final configuration, it locks in. I have this to a point now where like every time I put it on, I put this holster on directly over my right pocket, my right pants pocket. My holster is always in the same place. Everything else is locked down on the same spot. And that rig, that Ghost Hydra P rig, is my carry optics rig, my limited optics rig. Now, full disclosure, I don't change guns or gear. I don't have a difference in those two. I run the same Glock through both of those. But as I run to production, that's my same thing. I just throw an extra mag pouch on because production needs more magazines, but it's the exact same thing. I ran that to 92% in open just recently. Now, I will be shooting that rig in open. I'm just going to be shooting a true open gun as it comes to me. It's a long story. I'll get to that. But I'm gonna be shooting open with the exact same rig. I might just change the holster body, but I'm gonna have the same drop down, the same magazine pouches, the same everything. Everything's gonna be in the same place. It's the best rig I have found. Affordability as far as value goes. I don't want to say I'm cheap. I'm just not trying. I don't have the money to try 17 things. I want to buy once, cry once kind of situation. But I also don't want to overspend just to be Gucci. I don't care. I really don't care for colorful things and fancy things. Form, follow, function for me. I drive a Tacoma. That's the coolest truck ever to me. I don't really care. That's who I am. So I shoot Glocks. You know why. I'm not a hater of any other guns. I recommended the CZ, the M&P, even the Walther, right? My Ghost holsters, I'm not hating on any other brands. There's no, I mean, I would. I just don't want to sit here and shit on specific people. But there's plenty of other good options out there. I know there are. Now, ammo is one of those contentious things that everybody likes to talk about and everybody likes to kind of joke about and doesn't matter. And now there's two huge camps, right? Now, if you go to YouTube and you look at the comments of any of my shorts of me going fast with the Glock, it's got to be editing. It's got to be ammo. It's got to be, right? Can't be anything else. I'm shooting special secret ammo or this is sped up or something like that. So ammo matters. It's the only reason you can go fast to YouTube. Now, recently on Instagram, there's a meme floating around that basically said you're not good enough to feel the difference between ammo. So it's like, yeah, there's two camps. There's two thoughts in that. And I have a foot in both camps. And let me explain. Up to a Grandmaster level, the ammo's not going to make you better. It's going to make it easier, and it's going to make it easier to understand what you're doing if you're not losing control of the gun. I also find that it's just not affordable to shoot gamer ammo, so there's like a intermediate in there. But after a point, I found that I can shoot the same Blazer 115 just box ammo, the same GM level as I could shoot my Outdoor Dynamics Bowberries. The problem is, I was kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. If you're 99% perfect, it doesn't matter about the ammo. But if I slip 98, 97%, the Blazer is a little bit more snappy. It has a little bit of this, if you watch it in slow-mo, you have like this muzzle recovery dip that the Outdoor Dynamics doesn't have. So if everything goes perfectly at a Grandmaster level, sure, yeah, gear doesn't matter, ammo doesn't matter. But I'll find that if I'm trying to shoot for classifiers, if I'm trying to shoot like edge of my seat fast, the gamer ammo soaks up a little bit of that muzzle dip, that muzzle rise. There's a little bit less of the recoil impulse. The gun's still got a cycle. There's still going to be slide to the rear and come forward, but there's no extra oomph to it. Especially, I recommend Outdoor Dynamics for a simple reason. Reliability has come out of my mouth about 15 times in this podcast, and I think that's the precipice of all I've done is reliability first and build it off of that, because if it's not reliable, why start building a system off of it? So I always shot box ammo until last year. And last year I found a lot of my buddies were shooting Outdoor Dynamics, and I just grabbed my hands on some of it. And every batch of race ammo I've ever played with from everybody else, and I shoot a stock Glock, so let me be clear, it's not the gear letting me down. Every other brand at some point in the case of 500 or 1,000, I'd run into some issues to a percentage I wasn't happy with. I'd have 5 or 8 rounds in a box of 50 that weren't good. I'd find a bunch of crap. It always made me doubt like homemade ammo until I found Outdoor Dynamics. And then I started running, I think I got a sample pack from them. It was like a bag of 40 and it was perfect. Everything was great. And I was like, oh, it was a sample pack. Of course he's going to make it perfect. So I bought like a case myself just on somebody else's discount code. The best ammo I had shot in a while. It was just as reliable as any of the box ammo I had shot out there. And it was beautiful feeling. It was like the best. I shoot Bowberries. It's a 135 grain that he's worked up. That's going to make power factor very clearly, but you could feel the difference all day long between that 135 grain round and my chosen practice round, which is a 124 grain Blazer round. Now I talk about this because reliability first, just because it's box ammo doesn't mean it's reliable. I choose Blazer 115 and 124 grain because it's super reliable. When I start to go to Lawman and I start to go to white box, other things, I start to find a round or two per 50 is bad anyway. And if I'm going to run hot ammo, and it's also not going to work, I just don't care for it. It's not my thing. So Blazer is the only reliable box ammo that I would choose to run in competition and like for real training. Not to say I wouldn't train with, if you threw me a case of Lawman for free, I'm going to shoot it until it doesn't work. I don't care. I'll rack as many rounds out if I need to. But when I'm going to spend my money, I practice with the Blazer because generally I can barter with some guys for it. I can get it through an FFL real cheap for whatever reason. If I'm going to buy competition ammo, if I'm going to spend money, I don't buy anything else but Outdoor Dynamics because it clearly outperforms all my other. I just made a little Instagram video about this too, showing the difference between that recoil impulse I was talking about and like the predictability of how it shoots. Now, First and foremost, if you can't afford ammo and that's going to be your stopping point, then buy cheap, shitty box ammo and get good at shooting cheap, shitty box ammo. Because if you're shooting 110% recoil and you get good at shooting some crazy snappy ammo and you can shoot 10 times as much as you shoot some 150 grain Syntec round, I think that's good. You're going to get a lot more out of your training than that. I think it's first and foremost, it's better to be affordable and consistent. I find that affordable and consistent line is Blazer for me. But then if you go to Outdoor Dynamics, he's now got a 115 grain round, and using codes from me and any of the other instructors, my code is CTG, you'll get 5% off and free shipping. And you can now get 115 grain practice ammos through John that are just as reliable and less snappy than these Blazer rounds. And then I just always have a case or two of the Bowberries on hand for my major matches whenever they pop up. So really, it's similar to the gun talk, though. A GM's a GM. Like if we're standing at a classifier, if we're standing and asking, is ammo going to make or break your draws, your splits, your performance? Unless there's a huge difference, like a way crazy difference in reaction in the gun, no, a GM's a GM. It doesn't really matter. Now, that said, if you let a GM get comfortable and really get in the groove and that ammo allows him to do so, then yeah, you're going to get more out of it. So yeah, the difference between 95% and 100% is a big 5% difference that's sometimes made by the ammo. And when I go to major matches, that's where that 5% matters more than anything. In my training, I want things to be harder. I do. I want things to be harder so I can make it feel like it's normal for me to perform at 110% resistance, we'll say, right? Think going to the gym, using like band resistance bands, or like I want to lift real heavy at the gym so that my real life feels easy, right? But when I go to the match, the difference between winning and losing is sometimes a percent. Am I going to take advantage of that percent? Oh, you damn well better believe I'm going to. I'm going to bust out a case of Outdoor Dynamics. I'm going to get that 5% increase in predictability and reaction from the gun. I'm going to maintain the reliability of my ammo because it's still Outdoor Dynamics. It's still real accurate. It's still real reliable. And I'm going to use that 5% advantage. Why wouldn't I? If I'm going to a fight, I'm always going to use every advantage I can going into that fight. Whether it's a match or a fight, I don't care. It's the same attitude to me. I'm not going to handicap myself, right? It's pretty remarkable to see those differences too, because I have a funny little thing that happened to me in Delmarva in the beginning of the season. I got called for a alpha mic that was a double, and I'm not being funny about it. It was a target that was 3 yards away. I snapped a double off of on it. It was a very shot up target, so it was hard to read. The ROs did their best. It was just a whatever, forget about it, let's move on kind of situation. I took an alpha mic. I finished 5th overall at Delmarva for Carry Optics. That alpha mic put me from 2nd to 5th place. That's how tight it is. And then the difference between that 1st to 5th place was the difference between like 2.5%. It was pretty insane. And that was the beginning of the season. Now, the end of the season, when I won this last match, I just won Maryland State shooting Bowberries, shooting my Glock 45 bone stock. I won by like a percentage, like maybe less. Like I literally, if I would have dropped a Delta or a mic on the last stage, I would have lost. That's how close it is. So am I going to take a percentage advantage legally, of course, from Outdoor Dynamics or anything else I possibly can? Yeah, of course. And now that's where the gear differences come in. I don't want to bang my head up against the wall and shoot crappy gear in training. I want to shoot good, reliable training gear that makes it just a touch harder. So maybe a stock gun, maybe box ammo, things like that. And then if I have race gun and race gear that I bust out on the day of, it might make a 1%, 2% advantage in performance, not in my skills and my abilities, but basically the gear might give me that extra 1%, 2%. Where does that 1%, 2% matter? At major matches, typically at a GM level. If you're trying to perform or depend on that gear, that 1%, 2%, anywhere else, there's probably more training to be done. There's probably some lower hanging fruit to be picked, So I find that like this does the gear really matter question pops up a lot. What gear to use? Why the hell are you shooting a stock Glock? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? I think this pretty much covers my attitude on most of it. I'm not trying to talk crap about anybody else's attitude or opinions. Like there's a lot of guys who shoot some really crazy modded guns. Like if I myself was going to shoot a crazy modded gun, I'd probably go pick up one of those Masterpiece Arms 2011. They rule. I've kind of teased the idea that I'm going to be shooting open. I'm going to be shooting open. That Maryland match I won a Beretta 92X Performance that I am on JJ's part list and Sal Luna's part list. I'm building into an open gun to try to get from 92 to that 95% and hit GM with a not Glock. I thought that'd be fun. That'd be my 5th GM card too. And then once I hit that 5th GM card, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I'm probably going to start after limited. And I'm basically going to start after other divisions that I can shoot with the Glocks I have. I don't like shooting major power factors and all that other stuff. But again, you want to race for that last 2, 3, 5%. Every little percentage advantage matters. So I think it'll be fun to shoot open and start taking advantage of major scoring, things like that. It'll be fun to shoot limited, which is, to me, it's going to be a lot like production plus power, like it'll be fun for me. So it's my opinion that I think reliability first, gear and comfort first, training first, more than anything. You don't really need a lot of fancy things now. Again, like even down to my like one thing I forgot to mention that I will mention before I wrap this up is like magazines and mag extensions and things like that. I run as much OEM stuff as humanly possible. We all need mag extensions when you start to get into the race game because you want that +6 for carry optics, or you want a heavy base plate for production to drop free when they're empty and things like that. Now that said, I flirt the line between that whole reliability and money thing. I don't want to give Turan Tactical a lot of money. There's a lot of, it doesn't matter. I also are aware that like it's just an aluminum stupid little part, and I was a machinist, man. I don't want to give you $45 for what cost you $3. So I actually run Strike Industry base pads. The aluminum for the G17 base magazines, the +6s. This is like, I want to say 4 seasons old. That little skull demarker on the front just means it's a practice mag for me. I have separate match mags and practice mags. So the practice mags they're not different, but the practice mags obviously get their ass kicked. They're always getting dropped around. They're getting dirty. They're always on my range in the sand and in the snow and in the rain. The match mags are exactly the same. They're just pretty. That's all. But that's it. I like to use OEM everything. There are plus power springs that come with the base pads. I always order a couple extra of those, and in the beginning every season I'll throw them in. So nothing special, nothing racy. It's just normal performance and like preventative maintenance kind of stuff. Now, as far as practice stuff goes, it's funny because I just think really you need a good timer. I don't think anything else is necessary. I think a good timer, and if you have a striker fire gun, you should have one of these dry fire mags. That's pretty much the only gear that matters, because I'll find like outside of that, the Mantis system, don't waste your money on it unless there's arguments, whatever. I don't want you dependent on third party. There's ways to use it constructively, but I don't think being dependent on third party feedback is worth it. Like it's one of those things where if you're going to spend money on places and things, I'd rather take that amount of money you're going to spend on the Mantis and buy a case of ammo and go run it, or just buy more range time or whatever it is to you. You know what I mean? The reason I say this dry fire mag is because for us striker fire guys, it's just a pain in the ass to just either fake the trigger pull or have to rack the slide all the time. So it's nice to just be able to run my trigger and actually get feedback on what my sights do as my grip is either correct or incorrect. So I always get that question like, well, in dry fire, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? Well, pay attention to your sights. If you can pull the trigger multiple times, you get more opportunities to pay attention to your sights. Well, Sam, how do I know what's going on downrange? Well, if your manipulations are good and all that stuff's good, that's where I'll actually say one of the fancier pieces of gear, I've talked about it in a previous podcast, is that VR system if you're getting serious into this. Because you kind of realize, I'm going to kind of circle back, does gear really matter? Not really, right? What matters more than anything? The shooter, the GM. How do they do those things that they do? Their eyes, their brain. And how do you train those things? Dry fire plus accountability, VR. So I kind of find that like, yeah, if I can draw my gun, manipulate my gun, and handle my gun at a master, grandmaster level, the more gains will be made in the mental and visual side of things, right? Now, maintaining the physical side of things, obviously, we can't let it go. That's always got to be there. You have to have that as like a subconscious, just no problem. But at that level, above A class, I find the mental gains using the VRs, getting to that thing, like once you hit A class, working your shot calling, your visuals, your speed of sight shooting, things like that, that's going to matter more than anything. Up to that, it's a 50-50 split, really, because you need to get your gun up and out, and you need to get your gun running. But how often do you draw and reload versus how often are you shooting and manipulating your gun in any course of fire or anything you do, right? It's pretty much 10% manipulation, 90% shooting. So yeah, that manipulation's important, but don't just sit there and work your sub-second IPSC monkey wrist below belt starts all the time, right? Like it's going to be, a GM is GM because he can shoot like a GM. He doesn't just draw like a GM and shoot like a B-class shooter, you know? It's interesting to see the balance in that. And really one of the things that you'll start to see is grandmasters don't make speed look impressive. So does gear really matter? As long as you're comfortable, no, it doesn't really matter, because if you're comfortable and you're confident, speed doesn't look hard. It doesn't look like they're trying, right? If you look at an Olympian, they don't look like they're trying to do things at a world-class level. If you look at Grandmaster shooting at a like Isaac Lockwood shooting a 125 build drill, he doesn't look like he's trying very hard. It doesn't look as fast as it should be, if that makes sense, because reps and training and the mental got him there, right? He's shooting a SIG. He's just shooting a freaking SIG. He's not shooting a machine gun. So it's interesting to start to see like, oh yeah, I think the mental side of things and doing things so much that they just mentally and subconsciously feel easy is a bigger deal than trying to think about gear. So a lot of mental work, a lot of visual work, a lot of manipulation such that you could just depend on my hands will be in the right place and my gun will be in front of my eyes. But yeah, you'll start to find that the gear isn't really the important part in all this. I made Grandmaster initially with a Vortex Venom. This is not thought to be a race sight. It's actually a tiny little dot, tiny little window. I think it helped me index. I think not having a giant forgiving window made me put the dot in front of my eyes more reliably than most other guns. So yeah, it wasn't ideal race gear. It helped me get there, but this is what I made GM with. It's a stock Glock 45 upper with a Vortex Venom on it on a stock Glock 45 lower. My big evolution in this year went to the Defender, otherwise the exact same gun. And then really next year's evolution is just going to a longer version of it, but it's still a whole stock gun. And really my opinion and all my training in this doesn't change through all this. What I did is, I have this in another podcast, I won't go into it, but I just built a system around training. I built a system around shooting. I built a system around my mental and my physical, and something that's repeatable, reliable. And if I can repeat it and be reliant on the system, it don't really care what gear I put into it anymore. It's just going to work every single time. So I think more the system, the training matters. Obviously, the big hang up here is have gear that works. Don't be wrestling with your gear. Don't think it's going to be easy if you pick a stock Glock. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be easier to get into the sport. Like it's going to feel good in the up to C class with that race gear. But once you hit a point of training matters more, I think middle of the road gun is important, right? I don't want to say have a stock Glock like me. It's fine. Have a CZ, but don't go out and spend $8,000 on gear with $100 worth of skill, right? Spend more in your ammo, spend more in your classes than you do in your gear. I think that's a generally good rule of thumb. And with that rule of thumb, you'll make better decisions as per what gear you're going to plug in. So that's where it's like, yeah, your attitudes and your styles and everything are guided by your training and your personal feelings. So spend a lot of money shooting, spend a lot of money training, spend a lot of money seeing what others are out there doing and what they're capable of, and then make decisions based on that. I don't think anybody should go online and make like this gear is best and I'm going to bring it out and I'm going to argue with everybody that this gear is. Just go out there with what you got, make decisions based on what you see out there, and evolution's never over. I'm sure at this time next year, I'm going to be doing another podcast talking about this year's gun or whatever. And I'm sure it'll still be another stock Glock, or it'll still be very close to this attitude of reliable gun, right? But evolution's never over, because your brain, really the two things that I think every Grandmaster is always constantly working on is their vision and their mental game and their grip. If those two things are always good, that's the only thing that I'm really chasing down at this point. Everything else is just what's acceptable. If I have a sub-second draw and a 1 second reload, if I have quarter-second splits and the transitions to match, that's not as important as getting my performance down consistently. Like I said, I want to have a match GM performance. I don't want to just be a paper GM, a classifier GM, and having the mental and visual ability to do these things consistently and all the time is more important. So that's my little spiel on, does gear really matter? Does gear make a GM? No. GM's a GM. Gear's going to guide where you go and how fast you get there, and everybody's going to have different preferences. I'm going to shoot a Glock. Brantley Merriam's going to shoot a Glock. Eric Rafael's out there shooting a CZ. You know what I mean? JJ shooting a Beretta. I'm sure if you made them switch guns, as long as the gun went off every single time, we'd still all finish in the same place in nationals. You know, so take it for what it's worth. I think this is just my opinion again. It's what I do. When I go and take my race gun out to teach the SWAT and the operators, I conveniently don't have to switch gear. So I think that is another guide to my training. I carry and train with what I race with, but it's not that I'm right or wrong. It's just my little spiel into it. So thank you for giving this a listen. Again, I'd like to give a shout out to some of these companies that I mentioned along the way here. First and foremost, Outdoor Dynamics is the ammo that I choose to shoot all the time, as long as I can get my hands on it. It's my fault. I sometimes am headed to a match and I forget that I didn't order enough, and I like to shoot a lot. So I'm either shooting Outdoor Dynamics or some crap that I find because it's my bad. But it's the only ammo I trust anymore. John's the man. I shoot Bowberries because I like it the most, but it's also sponsored by the dog bow. Gotta love it. As far as guns go, I mean, I shoot Glocks. Glock doesn't know who I am. They don't care who I am. So it's not like I'm shouting out Glock or anything, but I like Glock. Now, out of Jersey, On Point. On Point is who does my grip job. So if you're ever looking for anybody in Jersey who does any grip jobs, trigger jobs, things like that, they're great guys. They did the silicone carbide on this, and it's awesome. Now, it's got a lot of my DNA in it. It really stole a lot of my skin, but that's what I asked them to do. I asked them to make this a step away from broken glass, and they listened. It's awesome. Really, as far as gear goes, I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Ghost holsters is the only thing that I ever rock on my belt for anything anymore. I have my PCC pouches are them. Open production, carry optics, limited optics is all their stuff. I have carry holsters through them. I have everything through. It's just they're who I use. It's who I prefer. If you're gonna order from them, Callahan 20 will get you some money off. If you're gonna order from Outdoor Dynamics, code CTG. I mentioned it earlier, but that'll get you money off the ammo. CTG for Outdoor Dynamics, Callahan 20 for the belts, the Ghost holster rig. And then I mentioned these guys. Dry Fire Mag is just a small little company that I found in like 2016, 17 at Mid-Atlantic Sectional, sitting at a little table. I love these people. They are awesome. They've become more of a household name, but the reason I like them is just the most simple, easy thing. I just use a standard Dry Fire Mag, no lasers, no lights, no batteries, just a clicky device, just as a opportunity to train. So shout them out. I think my code is Callahan 10 for these guys if it still works. If it's not, buy one anyway. They're on Amazon now. You can get them for a good price. But that's kind of my rundown of stuff today. I shoot for Vortex. I shoot Vortex Optics. I don't have a code for them or anything. I've been shooting their stuff though by my choice since 2012. So I would go with them. That's who I use. It's who I use all the time. I broke something just the other week. Actually, it's funny. I had a collection of things I had broken through the years. I had 6 years worth of broken optics in a pile. And I kind of embarrassingly, I was like, hey, Vortex. So I broke another optic, but I also have this pile sitting here. Can you guys warranty this? They didn't even care. They didn't ask a question. The things that were too old to replace, I got new versions of. That's how long I waited. They didn't care. They sent me all new things. Thank you. Have a good one. Here's a sticker too, by the way. So they're the best. If you're going to get an optic, they're the people. These Defenders are pretty hard to break though, by the way. I mean, I smash them off of things. I'm pretty mean to my things, and I carry the same optic I compete with. So that one I was showing you that's occluded has, I don't know, 80,000 rounds through it in the last season and a half, and it's fine. battery life's great. I've never had to unmount it or re-zero it or anything like that. So that's a little shout out to all my people. Really, I work with a lot of other companies and everything, but I just want to shout out the people I mentioned here today. It's not advertisement. They don't pay me to do these things. Those codes don't get me anything. It's more of I would buy from them. So can I give my, it's just a handshake thing. You know what I mean? I don't get paid to advertise these things. Oh, Shooters Global is the other thing I was mentioning, a timer. If you're going to get a timer, Shooters Global is my preferred timer by a huge, huge long shot. And that Shooters Global timer is just because, like, hey, as a personal trainer, it gives me the most data. So if I'm going to train others and especially train myself, I find that that's kind of like, I don't want to say necessary, but it is a very important part of what I do. I've been using that timer, not that specific one, but Shooters Global Timer since about 2015, 16. They've evolved and evolved and evolved and been doing, 2019. I've been using the Shooters Global Timer. Now they sponsor my club. I use them exclusively at all my matches and things like that. So I can't recommend a better timer than that. They have a smaller, more simple one. They have the smart timer, which is I recommend. They also have an app that you don't need to have a timer to use. My code for that is Callahan15 if you need a timer. They're also on Amazon and stuff too. They do deals and Labor Day and all these kinds of things. So if you ever see a deal out there, jump on it. You don't have to use my code. Like I said, I don't get paid for these kinds of things. I just want you to be aware of these companies that I would and still do spend my money on. So thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of the day here today. And as I always recommend at the end of every one of these podcasts, do not forget to dry fire.